It was not quite 4 o'clock in the morning when Leta Hamilton York gently shook her nephew awake. "Better get up, Bob," she said. "Breakfast is ready, and York wants to get an early start today." 14-year-old Bob crawled out of bed, still half asleep, but the smell of bacon coming from the kitchen helped him wake up in a hurry. His Aunt Leta knew they would be on horseback all day, and there would be no stopping for lunch, so she had made a big breakfast, the kind that had to last until supper. Bob loved staying with Aunt Leta and Uncle York. Every year since he was 10 years old, he had helped them during sheep shearing time. Uncle York owned a large ranch, and each summer they rounded up thousands of sheep so a crew from San Angelo could shear them in the big barn. It was hard work, but Bob looked forward to it every year. He loved the horses, the open country, the long rides, and the feeling that he was doing a grown man's work. Aunt Leta worked right alongside the men, riding horseback all day in her jeans, boots, chaps, and cowboy hat. She was a remarkable woman, tough, capable, and tender-hearted too. She had loved Bob since the day he was born and treated him almost like her own. That morning, as Bob sat down to eggs, bacon, biscuits, and cream gravy, Aunt Leta said, "Well, Bob, it looks like today will be our last day to work the sheep. We'll have the last of them rounded up by late afternoon, and then we can rest a while." Bob smiled, but part of him hated to see it end. After breakfast, they headed to the barn, where Uncle York's hired hands already had their horses saddled and waiting. Bob saddled his own horse, enjoying the smell of leather and the creak of the saddle as he pulled himself up. He sat tall, took the reins in his left hand, gave the horse a gentle kick, and rode out with the others toward the far pasture. By the time the sun came up, they had already ridden several miles. When they reached the pasture, everyone spread out in different directions so they would not miss any sheep. Bob headed left, proud to be trusted with his part of the job. The early June morning was still cool, and the air felt good on his face as he rode through the pasture. Birds called from the brush. Jackrabbits darted away. Every now and then he could hear the faint bleating of sheep up ahead. There was no place on earth Bob would rather have been. All morning long he gathered sheep, adding more and more to his herd as he rode. When he came to a stock tank, he stopped long enough to water his horse and scoop a drink for himself with his hands. It was hot by then, and that tank water tasted mighty good. By midday, Bob spotted Uncle York in the distance with another herd of sheep. Then he saw Aunt Leta with hers. Soon the hired hands joined them, and they began driving all the sheep together in one large herd toward the canyon. There was a trail that led down into the canyon, where the sheep could travel along the smoother canyon floor for several miles. Bob knew the route. He knew where they needed to go. Everything seemed to be going just fine, until he saw 6 or 8 sheep break away from the herd. Instead of following the others toward the proper trail, they ran down the steep side of an adjoining canyon. Bob knew that if he did not stop them, they would be gone. Without hesitating, he kicked his horse into a lope and took off after them. The runaway sheep had already reached the bottom and were scrambling up the other side. Bob urged his horse down the steep incline, leaning back in the saddle as the horse slipped and slid beneath him. They made it to the bottom. Then Bob kicked hard, pushing the horse into a run toward the opposite canyon wall. The sheep were sure-footed and climbing fast. Bob's horse began to climb after them, lunging up the steep side with all the strength he had. Dirt and rocks broke loose beneath his hooves and tumbled down behind them. The higher they climbed, the higher the horse struggled. Across the canyon, Aunt Leta and Uncle York stopped and watched. Aunt Leta's heart nearly froze. "York," she asked anxiously, "are they going to make it?" She could see the horse fighting for every step. She could see Bob hanging on for dear life. And though she wanted to look away, she could not. Bob and the horse were almost to the top when it happened. The horse gave one last desperate lunge, but instead of moving forward, he began to fall backward. His front feet came up into the air, and in that terrifying instant, the horse flipped over. Somehow, by the grace of God, Bob jumped free of the saddle just in time. He rolled down the canyon wall as the horse tumbled over and over behind him, barely missing him. Aunt Leta watched in horror as the nephew she loved so dearly rolled all the way to the bottom and finally came to rest. For a moment, Bob lay still. Then he got up. He dusted himself off, looked around, and went straight to his horse. The poor animal was standing again, trembling with fright. Bob took hold of the reins and stood quietly beside him. Then he rubbed the horse's neck and spoke softly to him until he began to calm down. Bob checked the horse's legs, straightened the saddle, and then began leading him through the canyon, looking for a better place to climb out. This time, Bob walked. The horse followed behind. When they reached the top, Bob climbed back into the saddle and rode off to find those sheep. Aunt Leta let out a long breath of relief. And then, because ranch work did not stop just because a boy had nearly been killed, they all went back to the roundup. Before long, Bob caught up with the runaway sheep and turned them back toward the herd. Later, when the sheep had almost reached the pens near the barn, Uncle York rode over to Bob. He grinned at him, and Bob grinned back. "Well, Bob," Uncle York said, "you had a close call today, didn't you?" Then he rode off again. Bob sat there for a moment, wondering what he meant. A close call? Then he remembered the fall, and he laughed to himself. It had all happened so fast, he had not even had time to be scared. And once it was over, he had not thought about anything but getting those dumb sheep back where they belonged. After all, he was just doing his job. At the end of the day, the roundup and sheep shearing were finished for another year. Bob went home with tired muscles, dusty clothes, and another ranch memory he would never forget. He did not know it then, but that would be his last summer working on Aunt Leta and Uncle York's ranch. His life was about to change. But on that hot June day, out in the canyon with the sheep, the horse, and the wide Texas sky, Bob learned something about himself. He had courage. He had grit. And once again, God had brought him safely through another close call.